Maintaining calm in our world of chaos. The renowned Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem, when he was a young lad, he used to walk the cheder boys to school. He would collect each one from their house, and together they would walk to the school. Well, one day they were walking, and there was a wolf that had the wolf was eyeing them, and he was going to pounce them. Well, they managed to get away from the wolf, and the next day, none of the children wanted to go to school because they were afraid that the wolf would come again. But Rabbi Yisrael calmed them down, and he said, "Don't worry, we've got nothing to be afraid of. It'll be fine." And as they're walking, they see the wolf again, and the wolf sees them, and the wolf runs to attack them. And all the children start screaming, and they're so afraid. And Rabbi Yisrael takes a stick, and he lifts it up to the heaven, and he calls out, "God, protect your children." And to the boys he says, "We don't need to be afraid of anything. We only need to fear Hashem. We only need to fear God. There is nothing to be afraid of." And as he called out to God again, the wolf lay dead. He just fell down, dead from nothing. This is how we need to approach our chaos. This is how we need to approach the problems that we are living with today. Because we have that same power. We have that power of lifting up a rod and saying, "God, save us." And then miracles just happen. Because that's the power of a Jew. That's what we can accomplish. That's the power of Torah. The world is in a very chaotic state right now. I know that everyone I speak to, a lot of people that I speak to, very frightened by the news. And the news is very frightening, and it gets crazier by the day, it seems. And then the fear just grows, and it just seems like it's unstoppable. And it seems like it's just growing, and what's going to be with the world. The truth is that Hashem is in charge, and we don't need to be afraid. Because, after all, God ruled over the wolf also, right? God could stop the wolf. God could stop any evil from harming us. He is actually overseeing the entire world. You know, it's interesting because in this week's Parsha, in the Sedra and the Torah that we read, we talk about how the Egyptians didn't believe in God. They had all their other gods. They worshipped the sheep. They worshipped the Nile. They didn't believe that God existed. Now, the truth is that their ideology was that there was once upon a time, many years ago, in the very beginning of creation, there was one God, and he created everything. But since then, he gave over all of his powers to the natural forces of the world, to the sun and to the water, and they all dominate the world in their own way, and they don't need God anymore. He gave up all of his control. That was the Egyptian ideology at the time before the exodus of Egypt, and the Jews were still enslaved there. God said, I'm going to break that ideology. And with the 10 plagues, he managed to break it one by one, and he showed them. And in the end, they saw God exists. Not only that, but he is in control. And not only is he in control, but he's very powerful. And even the Egyptians came to realize that. Now, if we would be witnessing such miracles in front of our eyes, then we would also believe and see so clearly that God is so mighty and so powerful. And of course, we do see miracles, and we just need to recognize that they are there. But they really are. It looks like the world is on the verge of collapsation, and it's interesting because the truth is that the evil which is fighting so strongly now, and the evil which is taking over so powerfully now, and it seems like no one or nothing could stop them. God doesn't want them to win. And if that's true, then they're not going to win. They will not dominate. How do we know that God does not want this to happen? We saw that there are many unfortunate, very terribly horrific, very terrible scenes for the Jews and for the world. The world has witnessed a lot of bloodshed over history, and it's really terrible. So that was not stopped by God. So how do we know this won't be stopped either? How do we know that God doesn't want this to happen? So this was predicted in the holy books. There's a Kabbalistic writing called the Yalkut Shimoni. And it actually talks about what will happen right before Moshiach comes. So I'm just going to stick something in over here. It starts off by talking about September 11th, believe it or not. September 11th, the fall of the Twin Towers, was predicted in that Kabbalistic writing of the Yalkut Shimoni. What does it say over there? It says that in the times right before Moshiach comes, there will be 2 towers in the city of the superpower of the world, the most powerful city of the world, which of course we know is New York. And 2 birds will come and they will knock down these 2 towers. Sounds like the fall of the Twin Towers, doesn't it? And that's what it was, and it was actually going around on September 11th. Right then everyone was passing out copies of this Kabbalistic writing. So following that, it talks about other signs in the world of Mashiach's arrival, right before Mashiach comes, right before we have that full revelation of the Messianic era, before we transform from the world of evil to the world of only goodness. What will happen? So it looks like there will be a lot of evil. That's what it talks about, a lot of some terrible things which we've already experienced and we've already gone through. One of the things that it says is that the Arab nations will fight each other and they will kill each other out. They will be fighting, and it gives different names of the different Arab countries from back then, which today translate to, I believe, Iran and Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and it's showing how that's what will happen right before Mashiach comes. These Arab countries will kill each other out, and they will harm each other, and there will be a lot of bloodshed in the world, it says, and including in Edom, which is America. And it says, and then God will say, humble ones, speaking to the Jews, God will call out to the Jews, humble ones, all that I have done only for your sake. The time of your redemption has arrived. And then Mashiach will be revealed in the world, and all the evil will fall away. And that will be the end of wars and bloodshed for good. So, it's interesting because, of course, Jews throughout history have quoted this Yalkut Shimoni, quoted this Kabbalistic writing, and spoken about it, very theoretically. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson, quoted this quite often, and he showed how different things in the world were already bringing in this Yalkut Shimoni. It was really already coming to life and already happening, and we see that we're so close to Mashiach. Well, now we're really witnessing this right in front of our eyes, and we're seeing this, how they are literally killing each other out. That's what's happening in Syria and with all the different Arab groups, not to mention, anything by name, but there's a lot of craziness going on, and it seems so chaotic, and the world seems like it's in a state of chaos. But it would be chaotic if there was nobody behind it. It would be chaotic if it seemed endless and it would just go on forever until the entire world is beheaded by this radical group. That's what seems chaotic about it. But when we put this into light, that no, this was predicted in Torah. This is part of the intent, the godly intent for creation. This is part of the master plan of what's needed in order for us to go from the state of exile to the state of redemption. The world looks very different in that transition, and every transition needs actual pieces to go from one stage to the next. And somehow this is the transition which God chose to go from the terrible state of exile to the fantasy world of Moshiach, the fantasy world of redemption. So it's not chaotic, because Hashem, God, is right behind every step of the process. And he already wrote it down. It's like rules that are written in a rule book. And, if your machine makes this noise, then this is what it is. Oh, it's already written in the manual. Okay, so I shouldn't be afraid if it makes that noise, otherwise I'll think that my, it's about to die, it's about to explode, it's about, but when we read about it, we're like, oh, okay, this is supposed to happen. All right, then it's not so scary anymore that your phone is making this weird beep noise. So, okay, it's great. That's what's happening in our world. God foresaw this and he wants us to be. So why would God choose something so dark to come as a transition from exile to redemption? If we're coming to a world of good, then shouldn't there be only good leading up to it? Well, we could look at the different processes that we have in the laws of nature. If you look at the way a baby is born, a pregnancy can be very uncomfortable. And of course it's worth it because there's a baby that's going to come at the end. So it's very worth it. And the hardest part of the pregnancy is, of course, when the woman is in labor. And then it gets even more intense and more intense and more intense. And the hardest part is when the baby is actually crowning. That last stage of dilation, and then the baby is actually starting to come out. That is the most painful part of it. And it's, that's when the mother starts to detach from her own body where she can't even handle the pain. And then the baby comes. And then the pain is gone. And the baby came. And it was worth it. And that's needed. That's the process which is needed. So the rewards and the light and the tremendous greatness and revelations that we will experience in the next world of Moshiach, which is very imminent, that all comes as a result of the work that we put into an exile. As much as a mother takes care of the baby during pregnancy and makes sure to eat very healthy foods and take good vitamins and rest well and get a baby massage or whatever a mother's going to do, so that baby will come out much happier and much more healthy and wholesome and at the right time, with God's help. And the same thing is true with redemption. That as much as we put in now, that's how much of the rewards we will reap and enjoy when Mashiach comes. That your life will be different in the eternal world of Mashiach, depending on how much you put into it now, and it really makes a difference. The evil that we're seeing in the world now is now at its highest peak. Why is that so? Well, when Mashiach comes, evil will fall away forever. And it'll be just like it was before, in the Garden of Eden, before Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, before they ate from the tree. It was just a blissful world, and there was no evil anywhere except for that little snake. Well, even the snake will be gone now. And it will be this pure, blissful world, of course, way better than even that. And it'll be living in the Garden of Eden, day and night. Just it'll be our world. It'll be the same world as now, with your house and your car and your family. Just it'll be a fantasy world. So Mashiach will bring the death and total end of evil forever. Evil knows that, and evil senses that. What happens when you resolve to do a mitzvah? And you decide, I'm going to change my life and I'm going to make this good resolution, and from now on, I'm not going to speak negatively about my friends anymore. Right? Let's say someone resolves to do that. So evil actually fights. It senses that it's about to lose its control and dominion in this area. And it fights. And then suddenly your friend says a really juicy piece of gossip that, you really want to listen to. And then there's something that you just have to tell somebody because, you just, whatever it is, you get tested. You get tried from heaven to testing you. And the way that happens is that evil is pushing to try to win. It says, I'm about to lose this. This has been like, I've been winning so much because this person just loves talking about her friends. So I've been like really growing beautifully over here. That's what the evil inclination says, is I'm not going to let this slip out of my hands so easily. And then it fights and fights, and the desire becomes stronger to talk about your friend and whatever it is. And with each person, it's different, of course, and everyone's got their own, every person is a whole world full of many pluses and many challenges. And so each to his own, but evil fights when we are trying to do the right thing. And now the evil in the world is fighting because it knows that it is about to be gone forever. And it knows that holiness is about to win total, utter victory over the world and forever. So it's not going to let itself lose so quickly and so easily. It's interesting because you say that like, if I'm feeling lazy, is that coming from my evil inclination? Or is it just the way my body is and how I'm feeling? So it comes from the evil inclination, of course. But the evil inclination is not lazy. It's not feeling at all lazy. In fact, it's working really hard. Our evil inclination works very hard to make the person feel lazy. But it's not real. It's just like the way the evil portrays that to us. So we can overcome it. And we can push it out and make the holiness win over the evil. And we should be working just as hard as the evil. And we're going to come back to that because you're going to see how that totally relates to what's going on in the world, that idea. So every time we read the news, look at our phone and we see something else and it's like, we feel that heavy heart and we feel that like, oh my gosh, how could Hashem do this? How could God do this to his people? How could God do this, to these poor reporters that, ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time? How could God do this? How could this be? We should just remember that this is another trumpet blast announcing that Moshiach is about to come. And the evil will fall away, and it is just so temporary. It is not chaotic, and it is not out of control. God knows exactly what he's doing. And the people that we're seeing that are passing away, they're going to be revived with the dead, and it's going to be really short, and it's not as legitimate as it looks, and it's not as real and eternal as it looks. Not that we don't sympathize, and that we don't cry when we read the news. And we don't say, gosh, we got to tear something up over here. We've got to just move. We've got to keep on doing. We've got to change ourselves so that we could change the world. We must bring ourselves to action when we read such news. But it's not like farfallen. It's not the end. It's not depressing. It's like a bitterness which energizes us, which we say, no, we've got to change this. We're not going to let the evil get away with us. We're going to counter the darkness with light. And how do you counter darkness with light? It's not the same way as darkness fights. Darkness fights with loud noises and with swords and weapons. But the way that light counters dark is just strike a match in a dark room, automatically the darkness is gone. It's very silent, and it's very automatic, and it just happens. There's a story of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he was on a train, and it was in Paris, and it was a very scary time for the Jews, and you weren't allowed to, it was around the time of the Holocaust, which of course he got out and went to America. You weren't allowed to be praying in public at all. Very dangerous to do anything religious in public. And what happened was that he's standing there praying with his tefillin as if nothing's going on, and his mother is sitting on the train cart, and she's getting, frightened, like what's going to be, what's going to be, how are the people on a train going to respond to this? Are they going to call the authorities over? Are they going to call the train conductor? He can get arrested, God forbid. What's going to happen? But obviously from the Rebbe, from a holy tzaddik, from such a righteous person, there shines a very great light. And automatically the darkness is dispelled. So what happens? All the people on the train car suddenly just come up and they make us like little wall surrounding him to protect him from sight. And it was just like something that just happened like automatically. And there are so many stories like that with tzaddikim, with the righteous people, that they just, even in this week's parsha, that Paro said, if I see Moshe again, we're going to kill him, we're going to take him apart, we're going to slaughter him, And then Moshe walked in, and he's like, how did you get past the guards? What's going on over here? And he gets so angry. And he said, well, we just got here. Guards, how did he get through? They're like, we have no idea. We were all staying there. We don't know where he even came from. But Moses, he got into the palace. He got past all the guards. And Paro saw him, and he stood in front of him. And all of his threats just like vanished. Just, he saw the tzaddik, he saw the look of Moshe, that godly light that's shining out of him, and it just melted away. Okay, what are you here for? Let's go on with our business. He totally forgot about all of his earlier threats. So many stories like that, because that's how you fight darkness, is by just shining light. Now for a tzaddik, for someone who's on such a high level, like Moshe Rabbeinu, they could just be, and they could just, unmask the godliness which is just pouring out of them, because they are so connected to God, so connected that their soul shines in them completely, and then automatically the darkness dispels. We've got to work a little bit harder. We've got to reveal our godly soul with a little bit more effort. And when we do, then the darkness dispels. And that really works. Like when in our own lives, sometimes we get into these like moments of like anxiety and rush and pressure and stress, whether it's with something, awful that we hear of, or something just in our daily routine, which is so stressful, and just getting out the door, and so-and-so said this, and there's just so many things that just pull us down. And darkness, the evil inside of us, is a very good fighter and just overtakes. And then we feel the negative emotions, and we feel whether it's anger, or very anxious, or very stressed out, or just overwhelmed. There are so many negative emotions, which, he's very good at doing. The evil inclination, that is. And you know what really works? If you want to just dispel that, say a pasuk of Torah. Just say, everyone knows, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Say a verse from Torah. Turn on music and just dance. And say, hey, we've got to bring joy into the world. We've got to prepare the world for Moshiach. Get some Torah in there and incorporate joy, and you'll see that suddenly things just change over. In the middle of the most chaotic times, when you feel like it the least, clear the floor, turn on the music, and just dance as if it's like the greatest Jewish holiday of the year. Dance as if it's Purim. Dance as if it's Simchas Torah. And it doesn't matter where a person is holding inside or outside, but we have the power to overcome the evil. And the strongest way to fight is not by saying, oh, I shouldn't be anxious. Oh, I should be anxious. I shouldn't be angry. I shouldn't be angry. Oh, but then you start thinking about the anger again, and then you get even more angry. So how do you counter this? Don't try to fight with the darkness. Just shine the light, and automatically it goes away. It's really cool. It really works. Give it a try. Back to our topic of the world chaos. Of course, each of us, we are an inner world, and we can counter the world chaos with our chaos, with overcoming our inner chaos and overcoming our inner evil, because a person is like a small world, and the way we handle our small world has an effect on the world at large, and it has a global effect, and it can really literally save lives. When you just do one mitzvah, you think one good thought, you chase away your own evil, because God reflects that in the world. Since Jews are created in the image of God, and God can create with his speech, God creates with his thoughts on Shabbos. That's what it says, that on Shabbos, God creates the world with his thoughts, and on the weekdays, God creates the world with his speech. That's what it means that he rests on Shabbos, is that he's not working as hard because he just needs to think and the world exists. So when we overcome ourselves and we think good thoughts, we speak good words, then we could really have an effect on the world, and that's how we can also create. Now, looking at history, there were so many times that it seemed like there was going to be, finally at last, the evil is going to win. And it really looked like that. Because so many times there were, different nations and different groups, different fanatical and radical groups, or different countries that were very powerful. And they said, okay, we're going to work hard and we're going to win and we're going to take over the world. And everybody in the world is going to have to submit themselves to our ideology and submit themselves to our religious opinion. And they're going to die if not. Everyone everyone is going to just submit themselves, and we're more powerful than them. There's nobody in the world that could stop us. So we're just going to take over the world. Has that ever happened? No. Let's look at what happened in Nazi Germany. How did they lose the war? Ultimately, it was because it was so cold and they weren't equipped enough to go into cold Russia, and they didn't have enough supplies, and because of that, they lost a lot of soldiers, and that ultimately led them to their death and to the fall. Looking at a little bit further back with Napoleon, when Napoleon and Russia were at war, how did Napoleon lose? How did Napoleon lose? Because of the same thing. They weren't equipped enough to deal with the cold in Russia, and then France lost, and that was the end. Of course, it's more complex, and there are many more details to each of these stories. But nobody was really able to overcome these great countries. Right? It was a war, of course, and it's 50-50 what could be. But who fought them in the end? Who fought Hitler? Yimach Shemai. It was God himself. God himself said, "You're too evil. We're not going to let you win." And God didn't want him to win the same way nobody else wanted him to win. And God avenged them. And then, then he started killing his own people. And then it was just, everything went downhill. So, evil is the enemy of God. God gives life force to evil. Of course, he gives life force to everything in the world. But when he gives life force to evil, it's different than when he gives life force to holiness and goodness. Because the way he gives us life force is by looking us in the face and giving willingly with love. He gives us life every second. But to evil, of course, it's his creation, and he's choosing to give it life force, and he wants it to exist right now so that we could overcome it and for all his other divine intents. But when he gives life force to evil, he actually throws it behind his shoulder. It's like you don't want to give a gift to your enemy. That's what he does. He throws it behind his shoulder. He doesn't really want to give it life force. And he gives it from his back, from his hindsight, which means it's a very constricted and low level of godliness. It's very covered over. And that's how they exist. So these are his enemies, the same way they're our enemies. And he's fighting them, and we're on his team. But he actually gives us the power to overcome them, and this is what he wanted us to do. And it says that right before Moshiach comes, we are going to be at the final stage of elevating and purifying the world. It goes through their 4 exiles after Egypt, the Egyptian exile, which of course we got out of. There was Babylon, Babylonian exile, and then there was the Greek exile, which of course is the story of Hanukkah we got out of, there was the exile before then of Persia, Paras and Madai, the Persian exile, which is the story of Purim we got out of, and the final exile is going to be the Galus Edom. That's going to be the exile of Edom, which is America. And I mean, not just now it's America, but for about 2,000 years, we've been in this last stage of exile. It's been almost 2,000 years, and that's a very long time. But of course, we've been throughout Europe and America. But we're basically finished refining it. It says that right after we finish those 4 big exiles, we're going to come to the exile of the Muslims. That's the last stage of purification which is needed. It's called Galus Yishmael. Now we know that Yishmael, he was the other son of Abraham. There was Isaac and Yishmael. And Yishmael, he's the father of all the Arabs, the father of the Muslims. And this is what it says in the Zohar in Kabbalah, that this is the last stage of our refinement that we need to refine in the world. So Yishmael, is telling us, him being like dominion, like his dominion over the world now, that tells us that now we really need to focus within ourselves, within our own little worlds. We need to work on refining that element of Yishmael within us. What is the Muslim attribute, Kabbalistically? So it says that that Edom, which nowadays would symbolize America, that's the attribute of acceptance. And Yishmael, Islam, that's the attribute of determination, which Kabbalistically is Netzach and Hod, if you're familiar. Netzach and Hod, which is victory and humility, which would translate into determination, and Edom, which was acceptance. So this is how we counter it, and this is how we purify and elevate Yishmael. This is where we're at now in purifying the world. When we focus on our own determination for a mitzvah, and we focus on our own strength and passion for a mitzvah, then we are affecting the world's health at large. We are making the world a healthier, holier, better place, because we're countering that. Now, if you look at what the Muslims are doing now, guess what? The Christians did this not too long ago in the Dark Ages. They were also into beheadings and savaging and the torture chambers, and it was, of course, horrible. The Christians of today would never do that because they are more refined, and that came from the refinement within the Jews, that we worked on refining those attributes within ourselves that Christians stand for, and because of that, we've actually come to a higher place in the world, and the world at large is doing better. The way the non-Jews of the world are it's directly linked to and connected to how the Jews are. Because we are meant to be a light unto the nations. We are there as an example for the nations of the world to emulate. We are there to show us, it says that Jews need to show the nations of the world that we put form over matter, spiritual over physical, and we put soul over body. What's more important, to look beautiful and be skinny and barely eat anything, exercise all day, or to really spend time with family, focus on God, and plant your happiness inside through doing things that have meaning, volunteering, giving charity. So that's what it means to put the soul over the body. There's something real over here, and it doesn't matter how beautiful a table is, but if the legs are shaky, then the table's going to collapse. It's not going to last for a long time. And there's a big problem nowadays that most of the products that it's made in China, the things are so cheap, and we're paying the same price that we used to pay, except that the companies, I guess, are making a lot more money because it's just so cheap. It's just so cheaply made, and it's cheaper for them to manufacture. And you can buy the most beautiful thing in certain stores, and then they just fall apart. That's our problem. Is nowadays people, the way the world is, that it really is focusing on the external more than the spiritual, and that's been the problem throughout all ages, throughout history. And the Jews are there to say, hey, we're going to look at the Torah. We don't go to emulate the nations of the world and learn from them how to live, because we've got the manual from God himself. He made the world. He gave us a manual of how we should live. You want to live a happy life? Here you go. Take the Torah. It's a gift for you, for the Jews, and use it to teach the nations of the world as well. So instead of going to emulate them and learn from them what to do and what we shouldn't do, let's go to the living waters of the Torah. The life of the Torah is very real and very truthful. That's the truth. So if we want happiness, of course, all of our answers are there in the Torah. So what do we do now with the Muslim world? Because we have worked so hard to affect the nations of the world, whether consciously or subconsciously, whether actively with them, or by stepping back and just focusing on our own spiritual work with the Torah and with refining our own characteristics. And yeah, hey, look what an effect it had. Look how far society has come, that a Christian is shocked at the thought of beheading someone. But what do we do with the Muslims now? This group seem to be inhuman. They seem to be completely radical and fanatical. Yet, look at that. It's just a stage. they're just a little bit behind the Christians because it wasn't their turn yet to be refined. With the Christians, we did work subconsciously or subconsciously. We did work on refining the world, and they, of course, were focused on refining also. And look where they're holding now. They're very refined. And the Muslims are still there. They're still beheading, and they still want to do those terrible, inhuman things to other humans. So how do we counter that? Well, let's look at what their big quality is. They've got that determination. They've got that netzach. They have what's called passion. They have a very strong passion. Well, we need to counter that by using their passion. We need to copy that passion that they have, and we need to learn from it and say, we're going to use that same passion. We're going to talk about that, what that means in a minute. And you see that what it is, Kabbalistically, you have the attribute of kindness and the attribute of severity. They always need to be at balance. Because there can be kindness in the world, but too much kindness isn't good. What if a mother says, okay, you don't need to go to bed on time anymore. You go to sleep whenever you want. What's that 6-year-old going to do? They're going to be a disaster the next day and throw tantrums. They're not going to have a healthy appetite. Their brain won't grow. So good sleep is very important. And you get to that by setting boundaries and having discipline. What about a city that police don't enforce the rules? Well, then crime gets out of hand. So the severity and discipline is very needed. So everyone just constantly baking the entire day or cooking. You got to stop and clean up. That's severity, that's discipline, that's stopping and countering. So there's always this flow in the world of give and stop. Give and stop. Constantly just holding back. There's the give and the stop. And then for the other side also, if we've got too much severity but not enough kindness, then of course that's no good either. And there goes the class, unfortunate, the abusive parent or whatever it is that somebody says, you did something wrong, I'm going to penalize you. And then they go out of hand. Well, where's the kindness to say that that's a human being? And you need to take in consideration why the child was going so slow and why they were feeling spacey and why they weren't able to perform and so on and so forth. And of course, you have to be very, you have to calm down and be calm and patient. So too much severity is no good either, of course. So with Islam, they just have not such a balance of these attributes, and they've got tremendous passion. And they're going at it with a lot of gevura, with a lot of the severity. Now this severity, when it comes out of hand, it translates into absolute ruthlessness and no consideration for human beings and who they are and what they are. Oh, you're worshiping the demon? Off with your head. You don't deserve to live. Nobody deserves to live unless they're like us. So that's all it is. It's an imbalance. And again, we can come to more of a balance within ourselves of the kindness and the severity, and that will have a global effect because, again, that's just what we're able to accomplish. That's the power that God gave the Jews that we could, and also non-Jews as well too, that an individual's act could really impact the world. So there was a story. That somebody came to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and said to him, I see that you make these parades, and the Rebbe would make these big parades on the holiday of Lag BaOmer, which falls after Passover. The Rebbe would make these big parades for children, and he'd make these enormous children's rallies. And the man said, "Why are you doing this? Why are you putting so much emphasis on children? We don't really see that anywhere else, that this is done." And usually it's the men have the special power when they learn Torah, or in other religions it translates into other things. But where does this come from that you're putting so much emphasis on the children? So the way the Lubavitcher Rebbe responded is as follows. He said that there's, he just got, the Rebbe had so many political ties in Washington, and the Rebbe said that he got news from Washington that according to the intelligence, there's a major shift in the Muslim world. It used to be that the leaders, the sheiks, would make a certain standard and they would do things, but you could buy them off. And the youth would just follow the leaders. All the excited youth, wherever you want to channel that energy, that's fine, because you just need to buy out their leaders and bribe them or convince them somehow to go a certain way, and then everyone would follow, and then it wouldn't be so out of hand. But now there's a shift. That the young Muslims are more fanatical than their parents and more fanatical than their grandparents. And you can't buy them off because they are just way too passionate. They are full of passion. By the Jews, it's just the opposite. The youth of the Jews are not as passionate as their elders were. The pioneers, those that came and they've sacrificed their lives for Judaism, and they scream Shema Yisrael in the gas chambers. And there are those that they survived and they still fought for Judaism. Those are our pioneers. Those are the giants that were following their footsteps. But we've calmed down and we've become more apathetic. It's missing the passion. The Jewish youth are missing the passion. So the Rebbe said we need to change that. Shema Yisrael, it was something which was that verse, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. That's a verse that we had from the times of our forefathers, from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We had it from Moshe. We had it from throughout all the generations. It's something which so many Jews died with self-sacrifice, saying those words. Hear, O Israel, Hashem is our God. Hashem is one. God is one. And that's something which is connected to the essence of the Jewish soul. That line of Shema Yisrael. So when the children of today stand up at children's rallies, they gather hundreds of children together, and they all stand up and scream, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. That's the passion. That's bringing the Judaism from our pioneer forefathers, from a few generations back, that they were so passionately sacrificing their lives to get kosher food and to keep on Shabbos and to light a Shabbos candle. They had so much passion. And we're missing that passion. Oh, we're not missing that passion. We're going to get the Jewish children together, and the Rebbe would have the Hasidim gather Jews of all types. Jewish children are Jewish children, doesn't matter what their background was or is. But just that power of Jewish children coming together and screaming those words of Shema Yisrael, that is how we are countering that passion that Yishmael is having. That's how we counter the passion of the young Muslims. And we bring it to life. Because with passion, you can beat the other side. Passion is the most important part of winning a war. If you want to win a war, let's say two people are battling, even if one of them is very muscular and very fit, but he feels so defeated and depressed and he's got no energy and he's not interested in fighting. Then you've got this little guy that can't really fight. He's not really that strong, but oh boy, is he going to work hard. He's got the passion and he's going to win because he's really into it. That enthusiasm, the joy, and that passion is what brings a person to life and what allows you to win. And that's, of course, in our own world, how we counter things also. What is passion? Passion is what's called in Hebrew zrizos, alacrity. That when there's a mitzvah that comes your way, or you have an opportunity to do something good, you run. That's passion. Jihad. What's the word jihad? Of course, it's used all the time. Unfortunately, we see that jihad is, what they use as their, bus bombings and all those things that, jihad, and they go and they're going to kill themselves for Allah. And it's used in the most evil sense. But we use it in conversation also. And, then I went jihad and I just went and did the whole thing. And that's what we need. We need that positive, that holy jihad. We need to take our alacrity, take our strength, and invest it in one mitzvah, in another mitzvah, rising beyond what we usually do, adding another mitzvah. Now there are let's bring this practically, because this is what it means to elevate Yishmael. In this very last stage, right before Moshiach can come, we need to work on elevating Yishmael, on elevating the Muslims of the world and refining them. It doesn't mean pulling somebody off the street and saying, hey, I know what you think you're doing is right, but it's wrong. Now, that's not how we refine them. Because remember, we counter darkness by lighting a match, by lighting a candle. A mitzvah right away chases away the darkness in a very quiet, peaceful way. And that's what we could do. In our own lives, we say, hey, this week I'm going to light Shabbos candles. Hey, this week I'm going to make sure that I get a mezuzah up on my door. Maybe I'll get 2 mezuzahs on my door. This week I'm going to make sure that I get some Torah books to sit on my shelf. That's going to add holiness in my house. Make an Amazon order. Or a Jewish woman can go to the mikvah if she's married to a Jew. You can go to the mikvah. Wow, it's like this amazing, amazing mitzvah, adding holiness into your marriage and into your family purity. There are so many mitzvah opportunities that come our way. And even the most religious person is never doing enough. Because it's infinite. God is infinite. The Torah is infinite. And the Jewish soul is infinite. The Jew is infinite. And we can never accomplish enough. Now, especially we can channel our passion into one mitzvah, which I think is everybody's favorite, which is tzedakah, the mitzvah of charity. Charity can take form in actual money, giving to Jewish organizations, giving to a fellow Jew that you see is needy. You could just Google, there are so many companies out there, organizations that will collect funds and distribute it to families that can barely put food on their table in today's economy. That's one form of charity. There's actual acts of charity. And then there's volunteering, falls under that category. Then there's also charity in speech. And that's giving advice to people. This comes from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He says that charity comes in many forms. We need to put our passion into giving charity. Especially, it's one of the most fundamental mitzvahs of the Torah. So when we are speaking to another person and we're giving of our time to speak patiently to a student, to a child, to a neighbor, to a friend, to give advice. Sometimes you stop with someone in the store and they look like they know where they're going. Hey, do you know where the Kleenex are, which aisle that's in? And people just walk right past. Like, what are you bothering me for? People stop me all the time. Everyone gets stopped, and there are no workers around, and I'm lost. Like, do you have any idea where this is? And it's so nice when you get to help another person, to find their way around. Okay, that's charity. That's charity in speech. And then there's charity in thought, and that's actually very powerful. And that's what we were talking about earlier, which is thinking positive thoughts about another person. And it looks like it's got no effect because who sees and who hears. But the truth is that thoughts are in a number of ways, more powerful than even action. Because thoughts are very inward, and they're most connected to the soul. It doesn't need as much translation, because the soul is very refined, and our thoughts are refined. So it's just a step or two away from the soul. From the soul, the soul expresses itself through our thoughts, speech, and action. So it starts out with our thoughts, and it goes from the soul to the will to our thoughts. So it's very close the soul. So when we think good thoughts, it really helps. And speech is a step removed because our thoughts produce speech. And from there it goes to action. And that's the most removed from the soul itself because it's physical and the soul is completely spiritual. So that's what we can do. We can add passion and charity through our thought, speech, and action. Especially encouraging the youth because children, teenagers, they've got the most energy. So if you've got a teenager, if you are a teenager, if you've got children, if you are a teacher that guides children, take that youthful energy and use it to do a nice program, do a nice volunteer work, and channel it, get them to scream out that to chant, we are changing the world. We are doing more good. Make up chants with them. Make up songs that translate into adding more light. Because actually you see this, these horrible videos go out from Palestine, where the way that they're educating their 3 and 4-year-olds are these videos that they're like singing with them, like, I will take a gun, I will kill Jews, I dedicate my life, and they're using this and like all these tools with little children, and that's like the most powerful in the negative sense. It's the most powerful that you see that like even their children are passionate about it. We've got to get to there. That's what the Rebbe says. We need to learn from their passion and translate that, and that's how we will refine the world. And then we could read in the news that it's all done. Then we'll experience Moshiach. Suddenly we'll hear the shofar and we'll all go to Jerusalem and we'll see the transformation of the world from bad to good. And that's something that we could accomplish with our little mitzvahs, with our passion on a day-to-day basis. With this, we are elevating the last stage, which is the Muslim world. We see that this refinement process has already begun. Many Muslims today are righteous and are passionate in a truly holy way. So we should see Moshiach now. Good luck with your passion, good luck with your mitzvahs, and it should just be right away.